All right. Well, good day, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us again with the MU Extension Garden Hour. Always happy to have you all out here with your great questions for us. We really do appreciate those questions. And I hope you all are getting to enjoy some of the weather, maybe not these past couple days, but as we're coming into the end of the week here, after today, it looks like it's going to cool off pretty substantially. Um, we do have horticulturists all across the state to help assist Missourians. So if you don't know who your MU horticulturist is, take a second here to jot down their name. Always happy to answer, any kind of horticulture related questions. And if we can't get you the answer, we'll find that information for you. So take just a sec there if you need to jot down their name. If you happen to live in a county that's labeled as open, just feel free to reach out to one of the neighboring horticulturists. We're always happy to give you a hand. So with that, I am going to kick it over to our weather master, Pat Guinan.
Thank you, Justin, and good afternoon, everyone. I'll get right into it. Wow, it's been I can't think of a more opportune time to go from summer to fall, and I'll talk a little bit about that, considering the temperatures that are cooling already in northern Missouri. I do want to note, though, how dry it's been this month. Obviously, a good part of the state, especially I'd say the southern half of Missouri, for most of the summer, we've been experiencing drought. Had a little bit of relief in August, especially over southern sections, but unfortunately, we've gone into the first 3 weeks of September. Here on the left, these are radar estimates of precipitation for the first 3 weeks of September. And these lighter greens and blues are where it's just really been dry. They haven't received much rainfall over a good portion in, say, northwest, west central, southwestern sections of the state. Southeast Missouri has been pretty dry. Overall, I think the best conditions have been right in the northeast corner of the state, right around Clark County. They actually were very dry up until about the past week or so. They've had some decent rainfall. They even got some this morning. I saw reports of some flash flood warnings this morning with some storms that have moved out of southeast Iowa and clipped the northeastern corner of the state. Overall, though, on the right, you can see the percent of normal precipitation. Anything in these darker browns or reds are indicative of how dry it's been. They're running generally less than 50% of normal for the first 3 weeks of September. That's probably about 2 to 3 inches below average for the month. And so this drought, we never really shook it. Had a little bit of a recovery in August, especially over southern Missouri. Things started to dry out in northern Missouri. And with this heat that we've seen over the past few days, some record heat with triple digit heat, in fact, over the past couple of days, it kind of has given this drought some teeth, and it's more or less roared back with a vengeance. And so unfortunately, we're still seeing impacts from this summer condition that's going to go into the first part of fall. Speaking of fall, the first fall begins tomorrow at 8:03 p.m. officially, and the numbers here, these are temperatures from about 5 minutes ago using the Missouri Mesonet data. Look at these nice temperatures in the low to middle 70s currently across northern Missouri. That's a strong cold front that's slowly moving south through the state. We're up to 90 degrees right here in Columbia. St. Louis Science Center is at 90 degrees. I see right here on the Busby Farm in Cole County at Lincoln University, it's 96 degrees. That's somewhat of a sheltered weather station. It's somewhat of a microclimate, but it's hot still, very summer-like for our last full day of summer. But the coolness is on its way, and we can see that across northern Missouri. On the right, these are the high temperatures that are forecast. Obviously, the impacts of that cold front, highs only in the middle to upper 70s today across northern Missouri. Still hot and summer-like across the rest of the state, mid 90s. I see even 100-degree temperature here near Blytheville, down close to the Missouri Boot Heel. So some hot temperatures, but they're on their way out, thankfully. Look at these temperatures over the next few days. That'll take us up to the weekend. Here in the lower left, minimum temperatures very pleasant tomorrow morning. Generally, it may be in the upper 40s across far northeast Missouri, but most of the state will see lows in the 50s. some middle 60s in far southern Missouri, but still some very pleasant conditions over the next few days. Look at these high temperatures for tomorrow, generally only in the 60s. It is going to feel fall-like. So I can't think of a better time to go into fall with these very seasonable, actually a little bit cooler than average temperatures. No freezing conditions, at least not on the horizon, at least probably for the next month or so, no freezing conditions. So that's nice to see. Look at Friday morning, generally lows in the upper 40s, low 50s across much of the state, and rebounding a little bit more warmer conditions. That warm air is going to try to work its way back in from the south. Could be in the middle 80s on Friday in southwest Missouri, but struggling to reach 60 degrees in the far northern part of the state. So with this big temperature gradient over the next few days, there are some chances, not widespread or significant, but nonetheless some chances of showers later today on into Thursday and Friday with another system moving through. But I don't really think a lot of precipitation, at least widespread significant rainfall, unfortunately, is not in the forecast. It does look like a very nice weekend shaping up, lots of sunshine, more cloudy conditions as we go into tomorrow and Friday. It looks like those will clear out by Saturday and Sunday. Again, very pleasant temperatures Saturday morning and Sunday morning with lows in the 50s. A little bit of a warm up on Saturday, a little bit more above average, back to more summer-like conditions, especially over the southern half of the state with highs in the low to middle 80s. And then cool again as another front moves through the state, bringing temperatures, high temperatures on Sunday, generally in the mid to upper 70s, maybe some low 80s over southern Missouri. So it does look like a very nice weekend shaping up with low humidities and pleasant temperatures. This is the forecast rainfall over the next 5 days. So this will take us through Monday morning. There are some chances of showers, perhaps a rumble of thunder later today across Missouri. Again, you can see not anything widespread in regard to heavy rainfall, perhaps as much as a quarter. If we're lucky, maybe a half inch right on the Kansas-Missouri border. That heavier precip does look like it's confined to much of Kansas, southern Nebraska, but unfortunately not a lot of rainfall with the forecast of showers, at least over the next couple of days. This is the forecast for next week. That'll take us through the end of September. That cooler condition that is going to stick around, it looks like for much of next week. The warmth is building out west, but nonetheless here in Missouri, it does indicate near to below average temperatures that would put highs for much of next week and into the 70s, perhaps lower 70s. Unfortunately, on the right here, it does look like this dryness is going to persist. There is a high likelihood. The darker that shade of brown, the higher the confidence that the forecasters think that this will verify. So it does indicate little to no significant precipitation, at least through the end of the month. Justin, that's pretty much a weather report. I'll hand it back over to you. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Pat. Definitely looking forward to that cool weather. Nice to sit around and have a bonfire this weekend. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to our moderator for today, Donna Offenberg.
I'm sorry, Justin. I think I was going to moderate.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Ramon.
Well, anyway, yeah, I'm Ramon Aranci. I'll be your moderator today. Donna is here, so she could have taken over, but we talked and I was going to be the moderator. So we're going to go straight to what we have, the question that we have for today. And the first one is going to come about pawpaws. How close can be planted to a septic drain field? And Justin, he was just talking to you all, will address this issue. Justin?
Thanks, Ramon. So this is a really good question to ask yourself. If you have a septic system at your home, you know, how far away should we be planting things? How big of a concern should this be? So from personal experience, I lived in an older house before I moved, and we had a huge cottonwood tree very close to our drain field. And when I finally had it excavated and replaced, the drain field pipes were completely filled with tree roots. And because of that, that septic system never really absorbed water very well. So in terms of septic systems, 20% of all Americans are out there using septic systems. So if you're not familiar, I know if you're living in the city, this might not be a concern, but these are on-site wastewater treatment systems that have a couple different components. There's basically a big tank that absorbs a lot of the water from the home, and then that water from the home moves through the tank and into a distribution box where it's fed in, or by gravity, it flows into these lateral pipes known as the drain field pipes. And these are basically generally perforated PVC pipes they're buried underneath the ground. And with the septic system, the soil absorbs the water, and there's, in a sense, kind of a biological treatment to help, clean that water, reduce pathogens and things like that. So the challenge with having a septic system in your yard and trying to figure out where you can plant is that the tree roots are very capable of entering these perforated pipes. And when that happens, there's not necessarily a great or easy way to deal with that issue. So the roots can enter these pipes, and then they have a great source of water. So they're going to grow, very densely, potentially inside those drain field pipes. And the pipes can vary in terms of the depth that they're buried underneath the ground, but they can be as shallow as 6 inches in some locations. Definitely, if you're doing any kind of work near the drain field, make sure to avoid any kind of heavy equipment use, as it could lead to soil compaction and drainage issues with that drain field. So just some general recommendations for what should really be planted on the drain field. You should really just have turf. That's what's recommended for right on top of that drain field. Annual plants can be planted close to that drain field, shallow rooted perennials kind of further back than the annuals, and then your trees and shrubs should be planted the furthest away. And so, in terms of vegetable gardens, you definitely don't want to plant vegetables on top of a drain field, and it's best to avoid planting them directly downhill from a drain field. If you do ever have any issues with ponding or pooling of water from that septic system, and then it could get washed down into the vegetables, and there could be some produce safety concerns with human pathogens contaminating that. If you are going to try to landscape around your septic system, make sure you identify, the total layout of that drain field. On newer systems, there will probably be a vertical riser at the beginning and the end of each of those pipes, but in a lot of older systems, they don't have those vertical risers, so it can be a little bit more challenging to figure out exactly where that drain field lays. In addition to the drain field pipes, you might also have a curtain drain. A curtain drain is installed to prevent, to kind of cut off water that's running down a hill so it doesn't saturate the drain field, and that drain field soil remains more dry and capable of absorbing water. So just make sure you, as best you can, map out where that drain field lays, where that curtain drain lays, so that you can make sure to plant appropriately. So I guess the general kind of rule of thumb is using the mature height of the tree as the minimum planting distance, and really better safe than sorry. Put it further away as opposed to closer away. Pawpaws have the potential to reach 30 feet tall. I've never seen one that tall. Generally they're an understory tree, and so they're not huge. This question was related to Peterson, which is an improved pawpaw variety. Now, I saw some of these varieties planted at our Horticulture Agroforestry Research Center. When they're planted in full sun, they seem to remain pretty compact, and the trees weren't huge, but like I said, better safe than sorry with this, because once the roots get in there, there's not really an easy way to deal with that. Also, pawpaws, they may sucker, and those suckers could emerge 3 to 5 feet from the main trunk. So make sure to remove those suckers so that you don't have a grove of pawpaws that ends up spreading further into your drain field. And also with these improved varieties, you want to remove the suckers because they're going to be the rootstock of a native pawpaw. So with grafted improved pawpaws, you have a native rootstock with an improved scion or top of the plant. And so if you let those suckers grow on the improved varieties, they're not going to bear improved fruit, and they'll take energy away from the top of that grafted plant. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Justin. Let's see. So that's a very good information about that. Considering food safety issues too. So our next question is about eggplants, and actually I'm gonna address that question. The question of the client indicated that his eggplants are not sizing. So let's see if I can go to a presentation here. Okay, can you see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so let's see, that we're going to talk about eggplant. The actual question of the client was, my Black Beauty eggplant appear healthy all growing season, have had 6 to 8 eggplants fruit. That's good. The problem is they get approximately 3 to 6 inches long and don't get any bigger. After a few weeks, they turn brown and I throw them away. Why don't they get larger? So we're going to address these things. Actually, 6 to 8 egg fruit is a good amount of fruit for one plant. And I emailed the client and have an additional information. And the pictures that you see there is actually his actual plant. Yeah. One thing that I'm gonna mention, the sizing of the fruit is affected by several factors. One of them is irrigation. And I want to emphasize this: when you grow in pots, it's different than growing on the ground. And I have here some calculations of how much water is actually in a pot. And as he is indicated, this pot or this plastic bag is actually a 10-gallon bag. But if you, even though when you grow in pots or in bags, the soil volume is limited. So you have to estimate actually how much water do you have there. In a 10-gallon pot, that is, you see there is about 2/3 full or 0.8 full. 50% of the volume of the soil is pores. 50% is solid material, soil, 50% is pores. Half of those pores are full with water at the field capacity, what we call field capacity. That is when you irrigate and you let it drain the water, the excess of water, for a few hours. So actually, we have, instead of 10 gallons, we actually have 50% of pores. That would be 3.5 gallons because it's 2/3 full, and 1.8 gallons of actual total water that is available for the plant. I mean, I'm sorry, about 25% would be total water. From that total water, only about 50% is available or easy available for the plant. So we're going down to actually 0.9 gallons of water that is available for that plant. Yeah. And from that, when we talk about 50% water deficit, we're talking about 50% of that easily available water for the plant. So it's actually 0.45 gallons to 50% deficit of plant available water. So even though if you have a 10-gallon pot, your actual available water is half a gallon. So you have to consider your irrigation according to evapotranspiration and how much that plant needs in that pot or bag. If we consider evapotranspiration is in a sunny day, depending on the length of the day and temperature, we're asking 0.2 to 0.4 inches a day. Inches is all surface. If you consider that plant that is there, the size of the plant is telling me that it's about 4 square foot wide in each direction. So it's actually those 0.2 to 0.4 inches times times 4 square foot, we're talking actually the evapotranspiration of that plant is about 0.5 to 1 gallon a day. So if you compare to the real, the easily available water in the pot for what the plant really needs, we are irrigating in a deficit. Once you water once a day, you're still in deficit. So in the really sunny and hot days, you might, when you have a full-size plant, you might want to water twice a day because the pot or the bag does not hold enough water to sustain the whole requirement of the plant. So that's one of the possibilities, one of the reasons or potential reasons why the fruit does not get enough size before harvest. So that's one thing. Another thing is fertilization. And although the client indicated that it has a soil pH 5.8, he added something to increase that pH, but phosphorus and potassium were very high, but he did not indicate how much nitrogen. The problem with pot or bag growth is usually by the time you have a full plant, it has already uptaken most of the nutrients. So it has practically depleted the availability of nutrients. So one of the recommendations is to keep fertilizing after flowering, either side dressing every week or every other week. Or if you have a drip irrigation, you could put an injector and have a continuous fertigation system. Yeah, in that way, the thing is, eggplants is indeterminate growth. So it keeps growing as long as temperature and moisture is available. And that's why you have to trellis it to keep up with the size. If you see here, the pot plant that the client has, the size of the pot plant in comparison to a field-grown eggplants for a commercial grower, the difference is much different. The plant in the field, because it has more soil volume, more nutrients, can grow much larger. There you have other pictures that can tell you how big or how full of foliage those eggplants are in comparison to the previous picture that the owner had, because he was growing in pots. So those two reasons most likely are why this fruit doesn't get the full size. Black Beauty usually gets between 6 and 8 or 10 inches long. The fruit can be very big. Another thing that you have to consider is pruning. Eggplants, as I said, is indeterminate growth, but lateral growth is very prolific in lateral growth. And when the plant gets too big with too many lateral shoots, you're going to have a lot of fruits, but there's too much competition among those fruit for the total foliage and sunlight that they get. So the more fruits that you have is going to get smaller and smaller. Usually the first fruit is the largest one, and the size is reduced as the plant grows. Especially if you don't harvest those initial fruits, you wait too long, as those fruit grow seeds, physiologically is going to inhibit the growth of the other fruits that come later. And this happened with many crops, watermelon, melons, and many crops. The first fruit inhibit the growth of the plant and the other fruits that come later on. So pruning is an important thing, to leave probably 2 or 3 stems and continue pruning so it can grow and produce new flowers and produce new fruits as you are harvesting the old ones. As I said, the first harvest is between 60 and 80 days, but it can keep growing and produce more fruits. Another thing is to indicate that his fruit gets brown and has to throw them away. Yes, if you wait too long, more than 3 or 4 weeks, the fruit start to ripen and produce seed, compete with the rest, and it browns up. One of the advantages of eggplants as well as cucumbers is that you harvest them green when they're just reaching the full size. When in the case of eggplants, when they're still bright, shiny, you don't let them get dull. That is too late. And after dulling, they become brown, and that's when they start to seeds start to mature and take nutrients and resources from the plant. If that size or that dual plant is that dual fruit is coming along and you don't want it, take it out anyway, so it won't inhibit the growth of the plant, and the plant can keep growing and producing new flowers and fruit. So consider that normally, depending on the variety, you should be harvesting those fruit between 2 and 4 weeks after flowering. Longer than that, they become too ripe and inhibit the growth. And with that, I appreciate your attention. I hope I answered the question of the client. And if there is any question, please put it in the chat, and we'll be able to answer those. Okay, so our next question for the day is, I have noticed my large locust trees covered with what I guess to be fall webworm. And Tamra Rial is going to address this question today. Tamra?
Hey, everyone. I hope you can see my screen. Can I get a confirmation on that?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. So yes, this question is about fall webworm and defoliating a tree. So let's delve into this a little bit. This is actually a picture from the client, and just a little information about fall webworm. It's actually a native, rather common moth that we have throughout all of North America, definitely here in Missouri. It's not actually the moth that does damage to the trees, but rather it's the caterpillars that will encase limbs in webbing, and they'll feed on the foliage. Again, they are the ones that are spinning those silken webs around the branches. It looks like spider webs, but it is not spider webs. It's actually the caterpillars. So here is what the caterpillars actually look like. They're kind of a lime green, lemony, spiky little caterpillar. And you can actually have dozens of them. They're not eusocial, but they are kind of a social insect in that they will feed together. So again, the webs are created by the caterpillars. The webs will start small. They might eventually encompass 2 to 3 feet of a branch. They can actually cover multiple branches. Occasionally, you might even find an entire tree that is enclosed in the webbing. So as the caterpillars mature, they actually can abandon their host tree, and then they search for protected locations where they will overwinter or pupate. So let's see. So the person who submitted this also said that sometimes caterpillars will drip from the webs. I thought that was really great imagery. But what's actually happening is the caterpillars, if they get startled, they can just drop as a defensive response. Of course, this makes them vulnerable in a different way, but it does help them avoid the immediate threat. And this is what an adult can look like. There are different versions of this adult, but here in Missouri, many of our fall webworms actually look like this with the pure white wings. They're actually a beautiful moth. It's a tussock moth, tiger type moth, and they have a few different names. There are some similar species that you might run across. So like sometimes you'll see webs on trees in the spring. And that is not fall webworm. The hint is in the name, it's fall webworm, but eastern tent caterpillar will build typically in the spring and early summer. So this is their tree. I agree. It looks rather traumatic. It looks pretty stressed. There's a lot of leaves that are missing. There's also leaves that are brown. Again, it can be traumatic looking for us, but as long as the tree is relatively healthy and you've been watering it throughout the season, it's not detrimental to the tree. So here's some recommendations. Control is rarely necessary. So you really don't have to do anything. You can just let it go through the cycle. The damage is mostly aesthetic. It doesn't usually affect the tree health. Another advantage of this at the end of the season with fall webworm compared to the eastern tent caterpillar is it's feeding on leaves that are at the end of the season, and these trees are getting ready to drop their leaves anyway. You will want to maintain good tree care. So make sure that you've been watering your trees. If you haven't watered them in the past for the summer, make sure that you're watering them now and continue to do it. Your trees need like 1 inch to 2 inches of water every single week. So if we didn't get that in the rain, you need to be doing it now. And fall webworm actually has a lot of enemies. So birds love those caterpillars. There's a lot of parasitic wasps and flies that will feed on them. So you can help them out to reach them if you were to disturb the webbing. So get a stick and just kind of mess it up, or some things recommend a stick with a nail in it to be able to disturb the netting so other insects can get in there to feed on them. But that is one way. Or, if you are able to remove it, you could always stick a stick in there and try to wrap it up. And sometimes the webbing will come out and you'll get a lot of the insects. If you do that, or if you were to cut out some of the areas, which is, again, not necessarily necessary, but if you feel like you need to, then you'll want to dispose of the webbing with the worms in it by either double bagging it and disposing it or burning it. So that's it for this. Fortunately, this is not one that requires a lot of effort. So just take care of your trees. Did we lose Ramon?
I'm wondering, I don't see him in the list here.
Yeah, he's still here.
Well, why don't we go on to the next person? I believe that Donna is going to be talking about lasagna gardening.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, I lost my screen here for a second, but yes. Thank you, Tamra. That was good. That was very good. So our next question for today is, we go into lasagna gardening, and Tamra, no, Donna is going to talk about that today. Donna?
All right. Thank you, Ramon. So today we're going to talk about lasagna gardening basics. So fall is here, and it's a great time to think about this gardening method. It's also known as lasagna composting, sheet mulching, layer gardening, no-dig composting, and cold composting. If you get the drift, it's about composting. So it's a gardening style that uses composting to develop a soilless, wonderful medium that you can fill your gardens with. And let me see. Okay, there we go. All right, so I classify it as one of the latest crazes because everybody's wanting that better garden. Everybody's wanting that better soil. And so this is one method to reach that goal. And so if you have plenty of browns and greens, you can build layers that will melt down into something wonderful. So basically you're building your own soil. Great for if you're not really fond of digging much or tilling much, this is a great method. If your soils are poor, if you want to eliminate weeding, because this type of system, as long as you're not adding weeds, you're not going to, and when I say weeds, I mean weed seeds, you're not going to have weeds because once again, this is a soilless mix. A little cost involved. The biggest part of it is going out there and gathering your materials. And we'll talk about that here in a second. And it starts here in the fall. A lot of people think, well, why wouldn't you be doing it in the spring? You want to do it when your materials are available. And so we're winding down, we're cleaning things up. So why not put a little more effort into it and start putting together a lasagna bed? So when we talk about lasagna gardening, we want to follow basic compost concepts. So we're basically thinking cold composting. So if any of you've had a compost bin, This is basically the same thing, except for you're making deliberate layers. So a rule of thumb is you're going to collect 2/3 worth of browns, which are carbons, and you're going to combine it with 1/3 of nitrogen, which are the greens. And so other things that need to be involved in the system is moisture, airspace, breaking down some of the bigger pieces so they have a rapid breakdown. And then, of course, those wonderful key ingredients, the browns and greens. So some of the carbon sources that you can use, a big one is leaves, fall leaves. So if you have lots of trees, it's time to start bagging them. If you don't have lots of trees, start sourcing them out from families and family and friends, or you might even check with the municipalities in your area and see if they do leaf collection days. And so you could possibly get leaves from that program. Peat moss will work, straw will work. I really don't recommend hay, and only because hay can contain a lot of weed seeds. You could use wood chips, sawdust, fallen leaves, like I said before, corn cobs, and chopped stalks, pine needles, dry foliage, shredded newspaper, and cardboard. So if you notice that a lot of this stuff is pretty easily accessible, especially this time of year when things are going dormant and fall is on us. On the nitrogen, it can be a little more challenging to pair up that third of the greens to the 2/3 of nitrogen, or I'm sorry, of carbon, but it can be done. So greens are things like grass clippings, kitchen scraps, manure, coffee grounds, plant cuttings, garden plants with no disease and no seed heads. You can do any of the organic materials such as blood meal, cottonseed meal, and alfalfa pellets, and that's to help the startup of breakdown. And then, of course, if you use weeds, you want to make sure definitely no seed heads, and that way you're not going to be populating your soil with lots of wonderful weeds. And then, of course, you can use any trimming. So if you do some minor trimmings around the landscape, you could also use any of that. It's important to be careful not to add any grease or meat or egg products or anything that would cause some of the coons, possums, dogs, things like that to start rummaging, because you want to make your layers, not destroy your layers. So just keep that in mind. So once again, you're going to pair up 2/3 material of browns and then 1/3 of greens. And once again, if you're short of greens, you might start asking around, who else has materials that you can get from. Once you have the browns and greens, you can go ahead and start thinking about how you're going to layer this. You're going to be alternating browns and greens. And if you think about a compost bin, that's what's happening when you're adding compost. You're adding browns and greens, and that mixture is what helps with that breakdown. So essentially, you are using the greens to feed the microorganisms that will turn around and they will break down the browns. So let me repeat that again. The greens will fire up the microorganisms, which will in turn break down the browns. And through this process, that's when we get a nice dark brown to black, rich soilless mix that is easy to plant into, easy to manage, and easy to harvest out of. I know the gardens I have been around, all I have to do is yank on the potatoes or yank a little on the carrots, and they all come up without digging. It's an amazing system. So you want to start with a brown layer and end with a brown layer, but in between it can you can rotate the brown and green. You can water in between if it's really dry, but you want it as wet as a wrung out sponge. You don't want it soppy wet, because then it won't break down properly. Each layer should be about 1 to 2 inches deep on the greens and about 3 to 4 inches deep on the browns. Your goal is a total of 24 inches of material, and that 24 inches of material will melt down to about 6 inches in the spring. And each year you you should plan to add more layers to your existing garden to continually to build up on your system. Just some tips. Stockpile your ingredients through the year. Just don't wait till the last and think, oh, this is what I'm going to do. Always have a plan and stockpile. Maintenance is always needed on these systems, so you want to continually be building the layers, and you can also continually build the layers through the year. Doesn't always just have to be in the fall. Just be careful. Don't put too much on. You can put a lot on around tomatoes, but just don't smother out your plants. Smaller pieces equal faster breakdown. I mean, you can use the bigger pieces, but remember, the greater the surface area, the more those microbes have surface to eat. So definitely smaller pieces. No more than 10% of native soil. Remember, native soil carries diseases and weed seeds. And so that's why we really try to limit how much we put in. We want this as a soilless mix. And we talked about don't apply the layers too deeply if you're going to be doing it in the summer. And make sure to moisten each layer down. And if you use manure, remember it's full of weed seeds. And so the more you put in, the more weeds you're going to have come up. So I would sparingly use manure. And there's always going to be a slimy stage when it comes to composting. So be ready for that. And the fact that you may have some slugs and snails and things that are also helping to break things down. Just remember, if you do the lasagna gardening, it is prime real estate. You want your most precious crops in those areas. I would not waste the space on things that you don't care much for. And that's because most of these lasagna gardens, we practice square foot gardening on, or we're doing in a raised bed system. And so just keep that in mind, that it's not as much space as you would do in the traditional garden. So remember, prime real estate. Okay, and back to you, Ramon.
Thank you, Donna. I appreciate that information. It's becoming more and more interesting, this. Our next topic is friend of foe, and Tamra Real will address this. We'll talk about this. She's going to give us some good stuff.
Thank you so much, Ramon. All right, you should be able to see my screen, and I'm about to launch the poll. Hopefully you can see that now. All right, so I'm going to give you just a few seconds to tell me whether or not you think this is a friend or a foe, or neither, or it depends. All right, 10 more seconds. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hurry and get your guess in. I'm ending the poll. All right, sharing the results now so you can see that the majority of you put down foe. Many of you put down friend. Some of you did neither, and it depends. I have to admit, I fooled you guys this time. So this one, I would say, is neutral, so neither, but also it depends. So mostly this is a neither or a neutral. These are actually nymphs of milkweed bug. So they do feed on milkweed stems, leaves, and on the seed pods. They have piercing, sucking proboscis mouth parts, but this true bug is more of a nuisance than a true pest or threat to milkweed plants. So this is what the adults look like. They have that deep orange and black. So that usually means when you see those colorations that this is an insect that a bug or some sort of predator, so it could be a bird, does not want to eat it. It tastes bad because, like the monarch butterflies, they are actually absorbing some of those chemicals and they're keeping them in their body so that they taste bad. So this is not the only insect that looks like this. This is the box elder bug, and it looks very similar. But it's interesting to see the insects with mimicry here. So anyway, this insect, again, it's a true bug. It feeds exclusively on the milkweed, at least as a nymph. It does undergo a simple metamorphosis, meaning that the nymphs look kind of similar to the adults. They have that deep red color. Eventually, the nymphs will develop the wings and reproductive ability, and then their color pattern changes. So What do you do if you see milkweeds? Well, you can just live with them and the damage. It's going to be very minor damage. It's really not worth it usually to treat the damage. If you feel like you would prefer to have fewer of these, then you can remove the leaf litter and stalks in the fall so that you don't have them overwintering. You could also hand pick them off. You can put them in soapy water. Some of the resources that I was looking at did have some possible recommendations if you needed to use an insecticide, but most everybody was saying, please don't, because it's really not necessary. If you do choose to use an insecticide, be aware that there are lots of other insects that are using this plant. And so you definitely don't want to be putting anything on this plant that would affect any beneficials. So just very carefully look for anything else. But mostly you don't have to do any sort of control on these insects. So that's what we have for milkweed bug.
All right, thank you, Tamra. Our next topic, actually, the horticulture terminology was before Tamra, and I made a mistake. So I'm sorry, Debbie, but you're now on and talk about hort terminology.
Not a problem. I do that all the time where I actually make little mistakes. Oh, there, I got it to go full screen. So the term for this week is olericulture. And I'll be honest with you, I hadn't heard this term before and I wasn't exactly sure what it was. And so I had to look it up. So in doing this with you guys and doing the hort terminology, I'm also educating myself a whole lot. So it's been really, really fun. I see folks are actually answering some of the different questions, are putting in some answers here. So we've only got 4 guesses so far. So let's keep some of them coming in. It's going to be really interesting because I was a little surprised at the answer for this one. Okay, I know there's more than just a few of you on, so let's get some more in there. No one knows if you're right or wrong. Okay, I'll give you another second or two. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So your results, 50 of you think that it's B, the study of plants in the olive family. And then you thought it was a study in production of insects. And then the third one was a study and production of vegetables. So kind of interesting here. I thought the olery was an olive. So I put that down and that is not the correct answer. The answer for the study of insects is actually called entomology. And so then that leaves us with the correct answer is the study and production of vegetables. And olear actually comes from oleus in Latin, and it means the study of plants where you're going to eat the portions of the plant. And I just thought that was very, very interesting. So of course I had to get all these colorful pictures out there on vegetables. So a new term even for me. Thanks.
Thank you, David. That was interesting. Yeah, it's a difficult word. I learned it in college. I didn't want to answer this time. I would be biased. But anyway, our next topic is about fall home insects invaders, and Tamra Real will address this topic.
Thank you. I feel like I'm giving many talks, but I love listening to my colleagues. Okay, so fall home invaders. This is the time of year when I know I start getting a lot of questions about, I have a lot of things coming into my house. How do I keep them out? So let's talk about that a little bit. There are a lot of different insects that might try and work their way into your house at this time of year, or definitely as it starts getting cooler. Some of these insects that you might see would be box elder bugs, cluster flies, brown marmorated stink bugs. There could be seed bugs, also the Asian multicolored ladybird beetle. There are a lot of different insects that come in. And so we have to figure out, why is it that they would leave their environment outside? Because they're outdoor animals. Why would they come into our home? And the reason is because they are seeking shelter. As it starts to get cold, many insects are looking for shelter, or perhaps it's because the light is decreasing. And so that is a trigger that says to them, I need to find shelter. And our homes are great shelters, at least it appears so many times for insects. You know, it protects them from, it's a little bit warmer. It is not as wet. So there's a lot of things that they could be looking for. It could be dark when they come into the initial parts, but sometimes they work their way all the way into our house. It turns out that our homes actually are not very good environments for most of these animals that try to come in. Our homes do not have enough humidity to actually keep them alive. So keeping that in mind, that helps a little bit. So when you end up with ladybugs coming in or stink bugs coming in, they're not going to be able to survive the whole winter. That might be short in comfort when you have hundreds, sometimes even thousands of cluster flies or the Asianic ladybugs coming in. But they're not going to be able to survive. They're not invading your house where they're going to be reproducing and taking over. So what can you do if they're coming in, or what can you do to prevent them from coming in? The most effective way to do that is to seal all the holes and cracks and gaps in your house, because they are finding a way to come in. And often that is through your doors if they're not completely sealed. Maybe your windows have some gaps. Maybe your screens, if you leave your windows open, maybe you have extra holes in your screens. So you need to check all of those things. You need to fill in any cracks, any holes. Maybe you need to recaulk things. Maybe you need to put on some new screen. Now, this seems like the simplest, most effective solution. It is the most effective, but sometimes it is really difficult to do. There can be holes that you don't see. So some other things that you might want to consider if they do get into your house, a vacuum is a great strategy for trying to get them up. It's a little bit weird if you're dealing with stink bugs because they are called stink bugs for a reason. You just might have a weird smell in your house for a little bit. You could also capture them and just drop them into a cup of soapy water as well. Some other things to do, leave your outdoor lights off if you can. That's a good thing to do all year round, but definitely at this time of year because many insects are attracted to that light and then they're right there at your house and they can come in. Also, I always recommend to not have any plant material directly touching your house. That does provide a nice way for insects to, again, just get into your house, and having a little bit of distance does seem to prevent some of those insects from coming all the way in. If you do need to use an insecticide, you can do that around the outside of your house. You'd want to spray around your windows, doors, and other areas where the arthropods could enter. I'm saying arthropods because it's not just insects. It could also be spiders and some other of those arthropods. And the reason I have a picture here of this, you might be thinking, oh, well, aren't ladybugs beneficial? Well, this is not exactly one of our typical ladybug. This is not a native species. This is one of our invasive Asianic ladybugs. And you can tell because you can distinguish these from our natives because there's basically an M on this part of the thorax. So pretty much all of these invasives will have that characteristics and our natives do not. So just final thoughts, try to seal any holes, cracks, and gaps, leave your lights off. And if they do get inside, don't freak out, just clean them up and either escort them back outside or vacuum them up and dispose of them. That's it.
Thank you, Tamara. I mean, that's interesting too. So our next topic is about fall coloring on maple trees. And Donna Altenberg will address that topic.
Okay, so once again, it's all about fall. Fall's here, and I'm so excited. I believe fall is my favorite time of year, and a lot of that has to do with the fall coloring that happens. Unfortunately, this year our fall color probably won't be the best, but some things will still be fairly nice and vibrant. And maples tend to be one of those. So I just wanted to share some of my favorite varieties or cultivars of maples that you might be interested in planting. So keep in mind that there are several maples that we can have here in Missouri. And in those several species, there are also hybrids and cultivars that are available. So we can plant red maples, sugar maples, silver maples, and Japanese maples, but there are also hybrids that cross red and sugar and red and silver and so on and so forth. So it's just not just about these. There are several others out there that you can be planting also. One nice thing about the maples is they establish easy. They're great for a landscape tree. They grow fairly rapidly, anywhere between a medium and a fast growth rate. One thing that is nice is they tolerate many soils. They're very adaptable. Zone 3 to 9, so very broad range where you can plant them, and they can get fairly large with time. Various colors on sugar maples, yellows on silver maples. Red maples, I know a lot of people always think red maples are red. No, red maples aren't always red. They can be yellow, they can be orange, and they can be red. Well, I always am asked, what about the name? It says red maples. Well, the red is actually in reference to the buds and the flowers in the spring that show up very red and not necessarily the fall color. And then, of course, we have Japanese maples that typically start out purple, and then they move to reds and dark burgundies because of fall color. So just to show you a few cultivars that I really like. These are two I have in my yard, and they are beautiful. Red Sunset has more of a red cast to it. And it's very long lasting red. So instead of just short-lived, a couple of weeks, you're going to get a longer red out of it. October Glory happens to be one in the back of my house. And I will tell you, when it is in full color, the trees glow. It's amazing how beautiful they are with that orange to red coloration. But yeah, they can even show a little bit of purple on those leaves, but they glow absolutely beautifully in the fall. These are two that are an up and coming sugar maples. Green Mountain is one variety and Legacy is another. Green Mountain tends to be yellow orange, and the Legacy is also more of an orange yellow. So one is more yellow and one's more orange. But that's what's so fun about the maples, is that you can get a combination of colors based on the cultivar that you pick. So you could have a couple different varieties on your property and really diversify on fall color. And then there's an Autumn Blaze. This one is a cross between a red and a silver. I really don't like to promote silver, but if you really like a hot color that's just gorgeous, this might be something you want to look at. And it's got the growth similar to a silver maple. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at the varieties. And then just one selection I know that a couple master gardeners here have on the Japanese maple is the Bloodgood. And it, of course, it starts out with that deep reddish purple, and then in the fall it turns a beautiful red. So just keep in mind, these are just several of the maples, but there are lots and lots of other trees out there that are beautifully colored in fall. And I encourage all of you to do a little homework and possibly plant one this fall or next spring for falls to come. So you'll be have a beautiful landscape. Okay, back to you, Ramon.
Thank you, Donna. And our last topic is Tamara Real again, and she's going to talk about walnut branches falling.
Well, thank you. Let me bring up my screen. We are almost at time, so we'll do this very quickly. I'm sorry, it's not coming up quite the way it should. Hold on. We are at time, and for some reason my computer is glitching out, probably because we're at time. How about I deliver this one another week so that we have because we're at time. Is that all right?
I think that would be fine. I'm sure that the attending people would come back next week and listen to this subject. So with that, I'll get back to Justin for the closing comments. And Justin?
All right. Thanks, Ramon. Well, we appreciate you all joining us today. And obviously, we got a lot of information that comes through that chat box. So if you want to save any of those links for future viewing, you can just click on the 3 dots here at the bottom of this window, and that'll pop up and allow you to save that chat on your computer, and you can pull back any of that information as needed. Just to let you know, we also live stream this on YouTube. If you want to check that out, you can go to YouTube and type in MUIPM in the search box. You'll also find our YouTube page that has all of our snippets, as well as recordings of the full garden hour. A lot of great videos on there we've put together over the past couple years. So just to let you know, next week is our last weekly garden hour for the season. And after that, we'll be going to a monthly rotation. So we'll be, after next week, October 19th will be the next garden hour. We'll be going to the 3rd Wednesdays from October through March. With all your questions, feel free to submit them to this ipmmissouri.edu town halls. We really like to get your questions. If you visit that website, you'll pull up a screen here. It'll ask you for some information and give you the option to go ahead and attach pictures as well, which are always very helpful for learning more to help us better answer your questions. And just know that we're here across the state of Missouri to assist you with any of your horticultural needs. We really appreciate you joining us today, and I hope everybody has a great weekend and gets to soak up some of this beautiful weather that we have coming our way.